Welcome to the Womb interviews. We feel honored to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Urvi Jangam. Dr. Urvi is the first visually impaired woman to secure a Ph.D. in German studies in India. The urge to find scientific answers to questions pertaining to non-visual aesthetic perception inspired her to take up the massive task of her doctoral thesis on aesthetics of the non-visual. Dr. Urvi takes avid interest in matters concerning international and intercultural cooperation. During her PhD and master's, she has always shown keen interest in matters concerning accessibility, particularly accessible teaching and learning methods. She intends to induce accessibility by training students to maneuver assistive technology in innovative ways, pivotal to their professional growth. And if I'm correct in my research, Dr. Urvi has never learned Braille and has taken assistance from technology to study in an integrated school since childhood. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Urvi. I hope this
Good
introduction does
morning.
justice to you and what you have accomplished so far. And thank you once again for giving us this opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. It's my pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm glad that I will be able to share a few things with you today.
We have read about uh, your childhood and your keen interest in education and what you have accomplished so far. A topic of particular interest to me as an artist and art therapist in training was your thesis on aesthetics of the non-visual.
Right.
Yeah, so we usually think about aesthetics from a purely visual point of view as like colors or form or texture and stuff like that. Your doctoral thesis brings out an entirely different perspective on the experience of aesthetics from a non-visual point of view, and we would love to know more about that from you.
Thank you for that question. That's really interesting. And I'm sure as an artist, you will be more than keen to understand and gain deeper insights into how does something work aesthetically. I mean, how does someone perceive aesthetically when she or he cannot really perceive optically? So, of course, that's a very obvious question. And the question was actually, you know, it had occupied quite some time in my thoughts. It was since 2011, my first visit to Germany on a scholarship. That was a scholarship offered by the Department of International Literatures at the University of Tübingen in South Germany, near Stuttgart. So that was my first international travel, as well as first international university experience in the field of German studies and even otherwise. That was the time where I was frequently asked, how do I perceive as a blind individual, and how do I actually travel, and how do I process the experiences associated with traveling, or meeting people, or particularly when it comes to landscapes, how does one process it when one cannot see the whole visual arena unfolding in front of their, generally a sighted, able-bodied individual would say eyes, but I would say unfolding in front of their whole sensory organs, so to say, because it's primarily for someone who cannot perceive visually, it's primarily auditory, or it could be tactile, gustatory, and of course the combination of all these senses.
Right.
So yeah, I would say it's there that this journey began, and I realized that I would have to find. I would have to research this topic because I couldn't really come up with any satisfactory answers. I had to Google. I had to read a lot of books, and even then, I had realized that there was this gap. Though in the field of psychology or neurology, aesthetics, perception of blind and visually impaired has been a consistent theme, has been a topic, but it hasn't been really researched when it comes to philosophy and aesthetics or literature. And that's how I decided to um, actually delve into this topic, and it was a challenging journey. So basically, this aesthetics is about how do you perceive non-visually b it's about being aware of your aesthetic perception, because not every individual, especially in India in particular, or outside the European and the American like worldview, we don't really care to inculcate this kind of perception. I mean, it's taken for granted once you're blind, or be it a born blind individual who is who faces it from his child or her childhood, or be it someone who was turned blind later in life, it is assumed that you lose the ability to perceive aesthetically, or you are incapable of perceiving aesthetically. So basically, it was my aim was firstly to make blind individuals themselves conscious of their own aesthetic perception, and I had to do it in a scientific manner. And secondly, it is about making the sighted world aware that yes, we can perceive aesthetically. I mean, imagine it's not just the old school philosophers like Kant, the German philosopher, who has stated that the visual sense is the most important one. But it's still recently that we have in the text of Merleau-Ponty that states in his, he has explicitly stated in his text, Phenomenology of Perception, that it's not really possible to perceive without the visual sense. He's based his research on a case study of blind patients. So this is the hierarchy that I wanted to break through and question. It was not questioning the history of these great philosophers or their worldviews, but it was to rightly point out that some things which they have pointed out are not really true. So coming back to my research, it was a challenging task because I had to not only find out primary text. I had my research object has been literary texts and travelogues written by German-speaking authors. And so I had to start from there because there is nothing in the mainstream literature. You can't really find a single text which says, which would come up with these kind of cues and would talk about, would address themes of blindness. It's really stereotypical. You would be surprised to find a kind of text that even if they're included in the realm of mainstream literature, aesthetics, philosophy, it's really stereotypical representation, and which one experiences, and it's really difficult to break through these barriers. So yeah, it's what through my research, I also had to come up with a theoretical framework, which I've based on the Indian classical theory of concept of rasa. So my new aesthetic framework, the non-visual aesthetic framework, I've termed it as Adrishya Rasa. Adrishya literally meaning non-visual, and rasa meaning aesthetic pleasure as we know it in the Indian context. So it's basically about color perception, because it's widely misunderstood that being blind, one cannot perceive colors or doesn't have a independent color concept of their own, which is absolutely not true. Like for instance, one can of course differ as to whether you've turned blind later in life, because it's a mixture of visual cues and the non-visual perception. It's a blend because the visual visual cues which have so far dominated your perception don't really disappear. I mean, they tend to influence the perception. And at the same time, it's the non-visual cues which come to the fore gradually with time.
Right.
So, for example, we have a lot of poets wherein I mean, they have experienced, they have explored this topic in their poetry. There's this poet called Dieter Kleffner, who is a contemporary German author, not a mainstream one, but someone who is pretty much present in the um, circle of blind authors, German-speaking blind authors, of course. And he has delved into this topic where he says he cannot really see anything after turning blind after a while, after like within those few years, he couldn't really perceive anything visually except for blur curtains in front of his eyes. Like, so due to the shock, the kind of trauma that the toll that it takes on one's mind, the loss of vision, it does lead to temporary damage, you know, wherein the pictures kind of, where the person is not able to invoke those pictures which temporarily disappear. And then he or she would be able to regain it after a while when they're used to the kind of perception. Of course, one has to be trained. So yeah, what I wanted to say is colors can be very subjective for someone who is blind by birth. In my case, for instance, I have light perception. I can distinguish between bright and dark. So for me, colors are light forms. Like red would be like, you know, an exciting color because it's slightly brighter to me, and which is associated with warmth. Whereas green is something really pleasant and subtle, which I personally associate with tenderness and nature, of course, but not in the stereotypical terms. When I say green, I have now the aroma of freshly cut made like grass, you know, in my nose, for instance. So my parents took this, like they actually ensured that I would be acquainted with colors and I would have my own concept. Though it's like, as I said, it's
different.
not at all close to what you would perceive visually. Or if you suddenly ask me, hey, which color is my dress that I'm wearing today, I certainly won't be able to answer that question for you. But if you ask me if you perceive this landscape and there are colors which appear there, or if I'm imagining certain colors, there, of course, it's a rich, colorful landscape. And that's the case with many blind people. There's a blind mountaineer by the name of Andy Holzer. He's the second Austrian blind climber, the second blind climber to reach Everest. And he says, and according to him, he is blind by birth. So colors are, he can identify colors on through touch on his skin. Like, so if there are certain colors which he relates to as warm and others as cold, for example.
Right.
So, and these associations were made due to his childhood experiences. So I'm sorry that it took slightly longer to answer this question.
No problem.
But it was essential.
Yes,
so,
it's really very interesting, and I think more people need to be aware that being visually impaired does not mean they have no experience of color, but it's just that they experience color differently and they have their own concept of warm colors, cool colors, and which colors can be disturbing and which colors can be pleasant. So this is a really very important topic, and I'm glad you elaborated on it so well.
Just one more thing I would like to add that we are at it, since you spoke about various art forms. There are pictures which are equally vital, which play an equally vital role in this perception, because many people assume that being blind, you are in the dark, but that's not the case. Everybody originates differently. It's mostly your four senses. For example, if I bump into something, it's a tactile object, for instance, then the first impression is going to be tactile. Then, of course, compensated and accompanied by the other four senses, and coupled with memory and your imagination. Like imagination really plays a vital role in this case. For the sighted, it's mainly about, I mean, it's basically taking you from one world into another. It's flight from the reality, so to say, in the generic sense, of course. But for the blind or visually challenged individuals, it's more about pitching the gaps which are missing due to the lack of visual input. So it's more about the imagination. It helps you to enrich your worldview, so to say.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that's what is really vital.
So I wanted to ask you about the painting courses that you have designed for blind, and how would that um, be designed or organized, or what would that entail?
That's really an interesting question. So personally, how I learned painting is through tactile pictures. My parents, my mother especially, used to draw tactile pictures on a thick cardboard paper with different devices, be thread or, there are there's this device called stylus, which you use while typing braille. So these kind of devices, you could make tactile pictures. And those pictures, I had colors which were scented differently. So orange color, for example, would have this, it would smell like orange. So those were liquid colors, and that's how I personally learned to draw and paint. And it really helped me to be at par with my classmates. I was never left behind when it came to visual arts.
Right.
So that's the basic idea, of course. So I would begin with my students with their own imagination by asking them to draw pictures. It would be mainly tactile pictures. Then we would have pictures, like shapes or objects cut into, like, paper shapes, etc., which would be presented to them. Because many times what happens is, if you happen to attend a special school, if you are educated in a special school only meant for blind students, you're really left out on various visual aspects of life, because it's so monodimensional. It's not anyone's fault, or it's just that the kind of, you, since you're grown up with people or peers who suffer from the same disability, there's hardly anyone to guide you as to what exists in the outside world. So in order to pitch in this gap, I think we will have to organize workshops first, make students familiar with several landscapes. And as you know, as an artist, you, I'm sure, must be visiting a lot of places, and for, in order to get it, like, an inspiration for your own ideas. So that's what we also have in mind. And only thing is, it has to be intensified, because as blind or low vision individuals, people would need a lot of first-hand experience. So um, you have to experience the object multidimensionally. It has to be a three-dimensional picture, at least in case of total blind individuals, or someone who was born blind. So one has to really touch and explore or smell it, or and all the senses have to be at work simultaneously. It's not like one after the other. That's not how, there's no hierarchy as such. So yeah, it would be a lot of field trips accompanied by some classroom work, and of course a lot of discussions, because one has to free students from the present stereotypes, or of
Right.
course the trauma that for the late blind individuals, that they are not able to perceive anything visually. They've actually lost their sense of sight, probably forever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how we would begin with, and one learns as a teacher as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this research would continue, and I am actually hoping to come up with a very comprehensive course,
Mm-hmm.
which would also involve people with different age groups and with different backgrounds.
That would be fantastic because age also plays a very big role in imagination and perception. So that would be fantastic. Also, secondly, we at the womb believe in encouraging and celebrating women and prefer to talk about
Yeah.
their strengths, as opposed to narrating the sob stories. So, can you tell us what values, beliefs, and strengths have helped you overcome the challenges that you faced in traveling abroad or um,
Yeah.
staying at par with your peers? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. It was a daunting task, I would say.
mhm,
People always used to tell me, "Hey, you do it so easily," and we hardly notice even that you have a disability. So, and of course, that's a compliment. I take it as a compliment. At the same time, it was hard to, of course, not as a child, because you are much more flexible and adaptable and curious, more than curious as a child, to explore the world
mhm,
around you. The credit all goes to my parents, who have
mhm,
imbibed and inculcated these values.
mhm,
So I would say the first thing that they taught me through their own example, of course, is always try your best. Never settle down for anything less than that. And it all started with, they had to take me after um, like with my medical treatment. I was diagnosed with retinopathy of prematurity, because I
mhm,
was premature baby. Being a premature baby, I was placed in incubator, and
mhm,
due to lack of precautions, the oxygen kind of damaged the retina.
mhm,
So they had to take me to the US, and I was operated thrice. And back then in 1988, it was a trying task. It was beyond imagination. Imagine, we don't have it today. We just Google things up or
mhm,
write mails, which was not a possibility back then.
right.
So my parents, despite their own difficulties, and you know, um, they ensured that I got the best treatment from uh, the best ophthalmological surgeon, who is even now regarded as Dr. Steve Charles. He's regarded even now as a field expert.
Mhm,
So I was operated thrice in the USA, and it didn't work out. So that was the time when my parents said, okay, now they can accept and go ahead with um, my disability. I mean, with raising me as a blind child.
mhm,
And that's where acceptance comes in. That's the second, value, which really plays a crucial role, because imagine, had my parents not accepted my disability, and had been sad about it, or had kept on wishing it was something different, or had they found a cure for me, they wouldn't have been able to raise me as an individual. So accepting it themselves,
mhm,
they could treat me and raise me as a normal individual. Like, I did all the things, participated in all the activities that kids of my age did. I attended a regular school. I have scraped my knees equally
mhm.
as you have, or anyone else must have done as a child. So
Right.
it's been a very enriching life for me, and
Mhm,
that is something which has really mattered. Like, I personally never have a feeling, even now. Of course, there were times as a teenager or young adult where I've questioned things, and pondered a lot about my disability, because that's the time where you grow and look deeper into yourself. So there have been times, I wouldn't say that one doesn't end up thinking about it at all, but
mhm,
then you can grow over it. You can again embrace the disability, so to
mhm,
say. And that's what is really crucial, I guess. And So even now, when I talk about my disability, I would say it's a driving force for me, which has helped me to reach the current level where I am today, not just professionally, but even as an individual, as a person. So, and I would say equality matters. I mean,
Right.
right from as a toddler, my parents had told me never let anyone talk down to you on account of your disability, of your disability. So, and likewise, treat others equally. You know, it was not
Right.
so. It was not a one-way
Right.
thing.
Absolutely. Right.
So that's what taught me to stand up for myself. I remember there there was an incident where in a park a person won't let me play on a swing, and the moment he realized that I am blind, he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and let her play. And he's like, "No, we don't." My father was like, "We don't need your sympathy," and my mother had told him, "Just leave my daughter alone. We don't, you know, like
Right.
she'll wait in the line then, but you're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to bully us." This is just one of the countless examples which
Right.
I've been facing in my day-to-day life. So, and even my parents, of course, or my little sister, who is 14 years younger to me,
Mm-hmm.
she's sighted, and but you know they all have to face this. And as a family, it's really important to stick together and treat the person, look at her as your equal, and that's what is really crucial. Yeah. Yes. So now that we're talking about values, I guess one of the most important lessons which I and my sister feel our parents have taught is they always said, be with people who are motivating,
Mm-hmm.
yet good hearted.
Mm-hmm.
And good hearted, not in cliche terms, you know, you're not here to make moral judgments on people
Mm-hmm.
and saying this
Mm-hmm.
is good and that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of someone who is genuinely willing to understand, who is
Mm-hmm.
open and to help. And I think that's where the difference lies where you have a disability, because that's a kind of filter which it works as a filter in the sense that only those people who are open enough to approach you as a disabled individual,
Mm-hmm.
as a differently abled individual, as people who want to understand your worldview, or have the, you know, are willing to invest the time and patience
Mm-hmm.
to help you out. Because I remember while I was in Germany, I used to need help in so many with so many day-to-day chores, and that's how I've made friends, be it while crossing the roads at times,
Mm-hmm.
um, on a bigger traffic junction, or be it grocery shopping, or on the bus or on the train when someone is trying to help you locate a seat.
Mm-hmm.
There is where I think some true friendships have begun for me. So, and that
Mm-hmm.
is where really, like, you know, individuals who are really interested in you, who are willing to equally value you as an individual, who are willing to spend time with you, come into the picture. And that is what I think is a plus point. That is where, when I say my disability is really a driving force, or I would say a positive in my life, which has blessed me with so many people. Of course, it's up to you to, you know, unless you ask for things, unless you ask for help, it doesn't come to you. So it's your own initiative, of course, and how you behave with people, how you nurture those relationships. Even the, you know, not all relationships are long lasting. Even those fleeting moments where
Mm-hmm.
you just exchange a word with a stranger, and a kind touch or a shake hand or a
Right.
smile, which you feel, which you
Right.
can hear as a blind individual. People just think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, she doesn't understand, even if I make grimaces at her. But
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, or even, yeah. So I think this is what is really important to nurture those interactions. And I think my disability really is an opportunity which helps me to get in touch with those kind of people. But because otherwise, just imagine you're in your own shell when you don't need help. You
Right.
don't you're so hesitant to approach other people.
Right.
So I think that's one of the crucial aspects of my disability, which I would term as a blessing.
What day-to-day changes would you suggest that people can make to support women with disabilities and make their lives a bit better? As a woman and a person with disability, your views would be extremely valuable here. I remember you saying, we do not want your sympathy, but we want you to understand us. So
Yeah,
um, I would love to know, as someone you call like quote unquote normal, what would
yeah,
they, they are all often not aware, they don't want to hurt people with disabilities, but they often don't know how to behave or act. So it would be wonderful
right.
if you could suggest some ways that we can modify in our day-to-day language or living, that can help people and women with disabilities.
So yeah, I mean, I think the first step is, I know it's easier said than done. People have their own hesitations, and the problem is that it starts from school, because
Hmm.
you're not allowed to interact with someone who has a disability. I mean, despite laws in place, like people still, students have faced this discrimination, or rather are facing it, that once a student loses her sight,
Hmm.
she's forced to quit the school and apply for a special school, but just on account of her blindness.
Hmm.
So, and I've had a recent incident with my student in my student interviews, where few of my students have encountered this difficulty. So that is where it starts. People are so scared of disabilities that they don't want to. They just want to shun people away who seem to be different than them.
Hmm.
So I think it would start, I mean, if more and more people, it's not just about blindness, it's about people with hearing impairments, people who are in wheelchairs,
Hmm.
and so on, like, or people with learning disabilities,
Hmm.
more importantly, because they're the ones, I guess, or people, autistic individuals, they're the ones who suffer the most, I guess.
Hmm.
So because one needs a little more time, or methodically, probably you need to organize your lectures differently with such students. They're generally the ones to be pushed aside at the earliest.
Hmm.
So I think the first step would begin from school, where one would integrate students, and in colleges, universities, of course, it all continues. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, that's how it begins. And then, of course, I would say people need to talk. There needs to be a dialogue. So in Germany, for instance, they have this concept in almost all the major metros in the country. They have this museum called Dialog im Dunkel, which means
Hmm.
dialogue in the dark, literally translated,
Hmm.
wherein they have this whole setup as a museum where you can experience the world through four senses. Like, even as a sighted individual, you're handed over a white cane. They take
Hmm.
away your phones or whatever, sources of light
Right.
that you may have with you, and
Hmm.
then you just they have a guide who is generally blind or partially sighted,
Hmm.
and then you're left with a person, and you're supposed to explore that world on your own. And
Hmm.
that's where it begins, with, it does might be bird sounds or
Hmm.
various soundscapes which pervade your life. It
Right.
begins there, and ranging from those auditory experiences, it comes down to a lot of multisensory experiences, like, you have um, there, of course, while crossing the road, when you have the special traffic lights, or while navigating, be it your school or your home, or otherwise on the street. How does one operate as a blind individual? So those are like a lot of aspects which are covered in that kind of an experience. And there are people who actually come out screaming in terror because they find it absolutely paralyzing not to be, like, to
Hmm.
be unable to see.
Right.
So I think we should have these kind of initiatives in India as well. And I'm sure there are people who are willing to learn. There are questions. It's just that people are scared to address them,
Hmm.
with the fear of, not wanting to offend the other individual.
Right.
And of course, it's the responsibility lies on both the ends. It's my responsibility if I am asked addressed as a blind individual to help the other person help me, to help to help the other person understand my worldview. Only then we would be in a position to be on an equal level.
Right.
So I think
Right.
it's a crucial task.
Yes, and having such an experience is obviously it's experience that would make them aware of how the life of the other person is. So having such
Of
initiatives and
course.
such experience would go a long way in changing the
Yeah,
perspective.
in all walks of life. For instance, I have made my friends see movies with audio, watch movies with audio descriptions,
Mhm.
so that they know
Right.
how does the description um, work, and how
Mhm.
does one describe something, be it external appearance of the
Mhm.
protagonist, or the attire, or even the facial expressions, for that matter. In theater,
Mhm.
that matters so much, the
Right.
gestures and the facial expressions, which are generally missed out on by a blind
Mhm.
individual. So, and
Right.
this is something which has to be cultivated. It can't be like, it's not an overnight
Mhm.
experience that, okay, now I have read guidelines A, B, and C. So
Mhm.
tomorrow I would be in a position.
Right.
Similarly, it's also with a late blind individual. She is going to take a while to
Mhm.
adapt to her non-visual perception.
Right.
So I think it's a long process, and it has to go hand in hand. I mean, it's not just blaming either parties won't work.
Right. Absolutely. That was an amazing answer to that, Dr. Urvi. Um, a large part of the womb consists of lawyers who work toward social change. So, as a woman with a disability, what changes in policies, laws, or infrastructure would you want to see in India as you have traveled in the world? What changes would you like to see in India to provide equal access of opportunities for people with disabilities?
Well, that's a tough one to address, because it's a complex process, and
Right.
I, not being a field expert, I would say there are many aspects which remain unaddressed, or even, as I mentioned earlier, there are certain laws, but then they're not implemented, like they're
Mm-hmm.
not practiced in when it comes to day-to-day life. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
disability awareness is still a major hindrance that we are faced towards as a society.
Right.
I mean, that's where the major problem zone lies, according to me, because, for instance, now the University Grant Commission, the UGC, has
Mm-hmm.
also recently made it compulsory that um, like a faculty member with a disability
Mm-hmm.
could apply for assistance, and that
Mm-hmm.
assistance, as you know, in Europe or in Canada or US,
Mm-hmm.
um, you get, like, if suppose you work for a university, you have a sighted person or an able-bodied individual at your service, which is paid
Mm-hmm.
by the university or by the government.
Mm-hmm.
So these kind of
Right.
measures would really
Mm-hmm.
help us in the long run. For example, I used to traveling around in Europe was easier only because of the railway service, their excellent railway service. And why was it feasible? Because every time I used to travel, I could apply for assistance. I just had to
Mm-hmm.
request for assistance, and then a person would help me board the train or change my trains from point A to point B. These are
Oh,
really small things,
right.
but then they they
Help
play
a
such
lot.
a crucial role in your mobility.
Right.
They're absolutely well trained in terms of how to escort someone who is blind, or how
Mm-hmm.
to escort someone who is in a wheelchair, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, or someone who would um, have another other forms of disability like autism or mental disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, an individual is responsible for herself. You can't just shove it on the other person and say, oh, but they didn't help me, or they didn't tell me that it was the right station for me to get out. Something silly like that. Of course, you have to be responsible for yourself, and you make your own decisions, be it any walk of life for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
But then at least we need these kind of regulations in place.
Right, absolutely.
So, and this is just one example. I'm not even touching the tip of the iceberg. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many aspects which would unfurl if we were to have a proper discussion.
Right.
So,
And I just did not want to limit you to the questions that I ask. And through this platform, I wanted you to provide an open space to express or convey any message that you want, would reach out to the public, anything that's in your heart and you would want to speak out and let the public know that has been inside you. So anything, it could be anything.
I would just say life is beautiful, and even if you have a disability, I know someone would say, you had the privilege to have the kind of parents you've had and the kind of upbringing that you've had, who went beyond ways to support you and to raise you. But then I think every individual or every parent can do that, and every disabled individual has the capacity in herself to grow and to reach a
Mm-hmm.
certain level and to realize their dreams, to follow their dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just say, never ever give up.
Mm-hmm.
That is what kept me going, at least. Coming back to your question of values, I
Mm-hmm.
would say perseverance and uh, the kind of determination that I've always had, that has helped me to master the kind of challenges I've faced at every turning point.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, likewise, it's also important for me. I would say that's what my parents have taught me and my sister. Believe in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's really crucial. No one else but you are in a position to decide um, where your dreams lie, where what are your boundaries.
Right.
So no one else is not even the closest people. It's for you to decide. Of course, you um, talk to people, or you consult people for the experience, or as a friendly discussion, but at the end it's you who takes a decision in your life
Right.
and even faces the consequences. So I
Mm.
would say for me, or for anyone with disabilities, it's really essential to deliberately at times dive into something which is difficult, because that is where and this I mean I'm talking about this on the basis of my research. So
Mm-hmm.
all the authors that I have delved into so far,
Mm-hmm.
deal with in my research, they all had they all shared this tendency of deliberately putting themselves through difficult tasks,
Mm-hmm.
accepting challenges. That
Right.
is what helps you to grow as an individual, and that is what has helped me grow. For instance, while I was in my junior college, I was told by the German instructor back then that I
Mm-hmm.
won't be able to learn the language since I'm blind, and um, I should perhaps learn a regional language because I have to scrape through at least
Mm-hmm.
to have to obtain the minimal scores, which
Mm-hmm.
was not true. She didn't know. She couldn't see
Right.
me beyond the disability, and which is so sad.
Right.
And so that is where I said, no, I take it up as a challenge. And I actually had good scores. And not just that, but I fell in love with the language, with the German
Right.
language. Today, here is where I am.
Right.
So I think it's all up to you. And um, yeah, it's if you believe in yourself, I think sky is the limit.
Right. So
And
you're
I think
as, yeah. Yeah.
helping others also matters. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I expect, I
Mm-hmm.
am I'm really fortunate enough to have received help in all walks of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say to reciprocate is equally
Mm-hmm.
important.
Right. So as you said, lack of awareness and uh, having no experience of what a person, a visually impaired person would feel, um, is one of the reasons that people have such stereotypes about persons with disabilities.
Yeah,
As you
absolutely.
said, it's very important to see them beyond their disabilities and um, value and give them a chance and give them an equal platform. So that's very important.
Yeah, precisely. That's what the problem is. I mean, that's what many scholars with academic people in the academia are facing, or even at otherwise at workplaces. That that people say, oh, we are supposed to employ people with disabilities, and that does happen, but it just happens on theoretical level, or at least speaking about the academia, there are
Mhm,
hardly any individuals in India who are able to make it after their post their PhD career
mhm,
um, into the whole level of a professorship or and so on, because it's still confined to a theoretical
right.
framework. Like people do say, oh yes, we have certain seats reserved for disabled candidates, or
Mhm,
and so on and so forth. But when it comes to actually giving people a chance,
mhm,
it's
right.
still rare, unfortunately. So I think that's where again gap lies, where
Mhm,
individuals need to be integrated even in the workplace. I know, we as blind individuals would take slightly more longer to orient and adapt ourselves to the workplace. There are certain expensive like expensive technology one needs to
mhm,
invest in, like the screen readers, if you're
mhm,
working with a company. But then if that's done, I mean, just to give the example from the
mhm,
arena of visual disabilities, of course, there is a lot more to that when it comes to other
mhm,
disabilities, of course. But
right.
if you give the person that exposure and that opportunity, I think that would make a lot of difference. And that is where as you said, this awareness factor comes in, because people are so hesitant and so they're just afraid to dive into the
Right.
unknown.
Right. Yes, absolutely. You have given some amazing insights. And at this point, would you like to tell us something about your Aesthesis Foundation?
Yes, of course. It's a recent venture. So basically, after my PhD research, after having come up with the concept of Adrishya Rasa, I just thought this concept has to grow.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be confined to a theoretical framework.
Mm-hmm.
I want blind and visually impaired individuals to benefit from the same. And I didn't want to confine it at the same time to the realms of academia. That's the point where I decided to come up with this foundation with a colleague, with my colleague, Mrs. Rita Rego.
Mm-hmm.
She is the co-founder and the director. So it's a joint venture where we help blind and visually challenged individuals gain vocational training, acquire vocational training, which is the first of its kind in India.
Mm-hmm.
We basically focus on non-visual perception and utilizing your four strengths, senses as your strength, or utilizing them optimally.
Mm-hmm.
So, because generally, the point is, people always view, oh, okay, it's a compensation for lack of sight that you're able to smell. That's what you always hear. Oh, wow, as a blind person, you smell so much. You smell so better than us. That's not true. I mean, you have to train yourself to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about a compensation. It's about utilizing those senses optimally, and as I said,
Mm-hmm.
knowing your strengths. So it's a very unique venture where we're trying to begin with the basics, equipping individuals with basic skills like language training, computer skills, soft skills, personality development, etc.
Mm-hmm.
taking them through various industries like winery, food and flavor, tea and coffee tasting,
Mm-hmm.
perfumery, and so on. Like where all the other four senses could be utilized at their best.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically aim to make these individuals independent, not just financially. We also have orientation and mobility, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
um, lined up in the courses, so that that's again one of the gray areas in our country. We don't really have a proper system for mobility training in place. So that is what I wish to do. I really want people to benefit from my experiences and the kind of training that I have had in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's all about collaborating with different universities, which we are in, institutes which we are in process at the moment. So that
Mm-hmm.
it's not just us, but um, concerned field experts, which would um, train our students. So yeah, it's a very inspiring journey even for me, because
Mm-hmm.
I am kind of trying to further my research with this,
Mm-hmm.
because we also have, as you had addressed in one of your questions, we also have, we tend to inculcate artistic awareness amongst our students.
Mm-hmm.
So we are eventually aiming to conduct theater and painting courses or
Mm-hmm.
sculpture um, courses for our
Mm-hmm.
students, because that is the artistic awareness is really missing, irrespective of the social status of an individual.
Right.
So we are basically addressing people who need our training, who are in
Mm-hmm.
need, as in people from those stratas of the society who would not otherwise have access to training like this. It would be
Mm-hmm.
free of cost to our students.
Okay, that's an
And
excellent
yeah,
initiative. Yeah. Yes.
we would
Yes.
actually, I mean, I would take this opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
harp upon the fact that we need people to volunteer. We need people
Mm-hmm.
to actually come up. And as I said, it's a dialogue, and this is going to be the exact platform for the people, for all of us to exchange ideas, to come up with new concepts, to learn, basically, to open up. So for our students to open up to the society and vice versa. So that's why I would really urge people to volunteer with us, to approach us, to spend time with our students doing something constructive, to share their field expertise with our students. Yeah, so another crucial aspect which is often overlooked, and not just for women with disabilities, but I think for women in general, people think, oh, you're being a woman, you shouldn't really indulge into a lot of physical activities or sports. You should just be away. And that is where even another more crucial factor comes in, which is self-defense. So, how many of us actually indulge in self-defense training, or it should be actually one of the first things that is provided in schools,
Mm-hmm.
but how many of us actually grow up with the same? So I think that's again a question which needs to be addressed right from the school level, coming through, taking it through till the university level, and there needs to be more awareness. Women with disabilities themselves need to be more aware of their own, like the need to train themselves for self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one of the sessions organized by one of the NGOs here in Mumbai, and that is where
Mm-hmm.
it was the first time when I realized that, oh, I had never thought of this. Like, how many times on a mode of public transport, as a woman, uh, we all face that uh, form of, well, it's be it
Right.
eve teasing, or if just someone is trying to
Right. Pass comments or
misbehave
right.
through. So, but not just passing comments, people they just feel it's, being a woman, you don't really have a voice of your own, so they can just touch you
Mm-hmm.
and go away, get away with it,
Mm-hmm.
which
Right.
is disgusting. You know how as a teenager, whenever I was faced with this kind of an experience, the
Mm-hmm.
kind of shame and guilt that it
Mm-hmm.
invoked. Only as an adult was I able to come to terms with the fact that, oh, it's not at all my fault that a man is misbehaving.
Right.
It's so, as a woman, it's our task as a sister, as a mother, as a daughter, even as a granddaughter for that matter, to tell the other woman, hey, look, you're supposed to raise your voice. You're
Right.
not supposed to be scared of men. You're not supposed to feel guilty. I know that this issue might have been addressed 1,000 times, n number of times on different platforms in different contexts, but especially with as a woman with disability, it's really, really crucial that because already your disability is daunting enough. You suppressed. There are women out there who are really suppressed due to their disability, and when if you have to face this kind of behavior from your male counterparts, be it anywhere, it could be your workplace for that matter, or a mode of public transport, or at home, or anywhere. But it's the pressure is always more on a disabled woman that she cannot speak up for herself. And that is what I personally feel really needs to change. And the change would start from your grassroots level, that is your home.
Right. Right.
Only if
Absolutely.
I practice something am I in a position to tell other women,
Yes, this is
So
an
yeah,
extremely important topic that you touched upon. And thank you so
so
much for highlighting
I
that.
would just add one thing that is, it really helps if you find or practice some form of sports as a child. So I used to practice. I mean, I was taught gymnastics, and my parents ensured that was involved in some sports or the other. So I can, I also am fond of horse riding, for
Oh,
instance.
wow.
So gymnastic, gymnastics basically helps you with balancing techniques and flexibility. So, even now, when obviously all of us fall. So
Right.
even I have had some major ones in my life. But the point is, when you know how to balance yourself or how to protect your body, you are spared from bigger harm.
Right.
And that is something all of us have to learn,
Right.
preferably from childhood, because, then our bodies and even our mindset is shaped in a particular way.
Accordingly. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is really valuable. Thank you so
I'm glad I could share this because, yeah, and I'm sure we are in the process of introducing such courses even in Aesthesis Foundation, our institute. It's
much.
just that the pandemic is restricting us
Right.
from going offline, and
Mm-hmm.
because as a blind individual, you need a lot of face-to-face contact, and one needs to interact physically with you in order to show you certain things.
Right.
Your hands, like the sense of
Mm-hmm.
touch, the whole tactile orientation, and clear,
Mm-hmm.
like getting tactile concepts, or rather getting concepts cleared through tactile channel of communication is
Mm-hmm.
vital.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we aim to do.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Urvi, and for such an inspiring and insightful conversation. And I'm sure your journey will be a true inspiration for many women out there who feel that their disability restricts them or limits them from being successful. And I genuinely salute you for all the accomplishments you have made. And I'm sure there are many more to come. Also, thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. I'm so glad to be with you today, and this, I'm sure, is a wonderful platform which will help me grow, which would help me reach out to people. And
Mhm.
thank you once again for this opportunity, this wonderful opportunity.
It's our pleasure always.